Welcome to another edition of Litigators Corner, and it is my privilege today to be with Mike Sitrick, who is the founder of Sitrick and Company and an internationally recognized expert in media and PR relations. Mike is referred to by many as the Wizard of Spin. He is the author of many articles and books, including Spin and The Handler, and he is pretty much known throughout many industries as the guy to call. Mike, welcome, and thank you for coming today.
That's very kind. The second book is The Fixer, not The Handler.
The Fixer. I'm sorry. I always refer to you as The Handler. But
no, that's okay. I've been referred to as worse. So.
I take it as a compliment, but thank you for correcting me. Mike, how did you get into this line of work?
Well, I went to school. I have degrees in business and journalism, and I wanted to be a journalist. But I was working for a very short time after school as a journalist, and I was making $125 a week. It's a long time ago. And the Chicago Tribune approached me and said, we'll pay you $125 a week. And I said, I'm already making that. And they said, well, we're the Chicago Tribune. And I said, yeah, but it isn't going to put food on the table. And I was doing some work for the Baltimore News American and the Washington Star at the time. And then I got an offer to go into PR at $160 a week. And I said to my wife, I really love journalism, but I like eating better. And that literally took me into the journalism business. And I ended up I'm moving to Chicago. I got the first jobs in Baltimore. I'm a graduate of the University of Maryland in College Park. And then I was offered a spot in the Richard J. Daley administration, mayor of Chicago. And from there, I went to Western Electric as the coordinator of press services. And then I went to the mayor's office. And then from there to an agency, public agency. And then at 27, I was the head of PR of a Fortune 500 company. And at 33, vice president and senior vice president of, I like to say, all relations, but extramarital, public relations, government relations, investor relations at Wix companies. And then I founded my own firm at the end of 1988. Wix was being purchased, by a private company, Blackstone and Wasserstein Perella, actually, two companies. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. I thought it was going to be too boring. I actually was going to go into corporate. I was going to go stay in corporate, and I was offered some very exciting corporate opportunities. Actually, one of them with sign-on bonus. And Stanley Gold, who ran Shamrock for Roy Disney, and was his partner at Shamrock for Roy Disney, came to me and he said, "We're trying to take over Polaroid, and they're calling Roy the Raider, and we want you to handle this for us." And I said, "Stan, I don't even have an agency yet. I'm still winding down at Wix." He said, "Oh, I talked to Sandy Sigaloff. It's okay." And so I said, "Okay, fine." And then Rich Levin, who's one of the authors of the Bankruptcy Code, along with Kenny Klee, who's in Los Angeles, still in LA, they were both in LA, said, "Look, we're doing public service in New Hampshire. I need your help here. We're not happy with the PR firm." I said, "Rich, I don't have a firm. It's just me." And he said, no, you just met Stanley. And that's literally how my firm came together. Everybody kept coming to me, and I was hiring people, and they were going out into the field before I could even get into an office. And that was, it'll be 32 years this February. In fact, February 1st, though I really started at the end of 1988, but the official launch date of the firm was February 1st, 1989. And that's how we've grown ever since. It's all by, I would say, 95% by referral, even to this day. And so it's been a fun ride, and it's not over yet.
Yeah, I can tell from the look on your face that you enjoy it, which is as important as anything. What to you is the art, or as some call it, the black art of strategic communication?
Well, that name was given to me. I think Gawker may have given it to me or something. I don't remember. but it means kind of working in the background. I think it also could be, there's something called we call it black PR, and that's when you're taking an adversarial position against someone. I have something called the Wheel of Pain, which I wrote about in my 1989 book. If truth be told, Sandy Sigaloff, very famous turnaround expert, came up with that phrase, which I appropriated. I hope not misappropriated. Sandy has passed away. But it's the Wheel of Pain, as we mean it, is when somebody does something wrong, and all of a sudden it becomes public. So it's one thing if someone steals from a business partner and they get a lawsuit. It's another thing if someone steals from a business partner and they're sued, and then it ends up in the LA Times and all their friends and their neighbors and ministers or rabbis read about it. It takes on a different level. And people say, well, listen, every time I'm deposed, I'm asked about this. It's usually, I should say, I'm talking primarily as a third party or a recipient witness. But that's what it basically means. And so, I guess that's what they mean about the dark art. I guess, I don't know, but I'm called all kinds of things.
And most of them complimentary. I was looking, a lot of attorneys, I think, take a position. I know that we've talked about it and I've seen your presentations on this issue. No comment, or that PR is not their problem. Why is that a mistake, do you think, Mike?
Well, there was a Barron's editor I knew who was a Vietnam War veteran. And he said to a partner, and a former partner, he's retired now, very dear friend of mine, I love when people say no comment, because to me that means they're in the free fire zone. And what he meant is, they call you up and they want to know, we're going to write such and such about you, or we're going to write such and such about your client. And so you say, I'm not going to comment. And then the article comes out and it's disparaging your client. And you have, and when asked for a response, Hillary John's attorney for John Smith refused comment. You get one side of the story out. And in my latest book, I talk about I understand there are times you can't comment. There are a number of instances you can't comment. You don't know the facts. It may be a criminal case, but I still don't think that's a reason you can't comment, and I'll tell you in a minute. You don't really have a comment, right? So, but if it's a criminal case, you can say, look, we deny the allegation, but because of the nature of the case, we can't comment further. Or if you don't want to deny the allegations, which is very rare, you can say, look, our client would like to comment, but at this point we can't. So at least you put some context. But when we take offense, I love when client side doesn't comment, because then it becomes a one-sided story.
Michael, have you seen situations where, for example, news media gets out of control and what's maybe rumor or a statement sort of becomes a fact in the public eye?
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time. And I had a client where there was an allegation published in a book, and this 20 years later, and the client said it was absolutely untrue. And I said, well, why didn't you say it was untrue? He said, well, I ignored it. And 20 years later, they were still writing about it as if it was fact. And they took the position because he never addressed it or never denied it, that it must be true. And that's why, look, what's published, and that was 20 years ago. So now, all somebody has to do is Google your name and this kind of stuff pops up. Reputation damage lives forever.
And I've seen that happen where they said, well, there was no libel suit, there was no retraction, no one said anything. Okay, we have to assume maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Michael, what are some of the common mistakes that you see lawyers make when there is a case that has gotten to the press or may get to the press or may result in publicity?
Well, one of the biggest is, the lawyers will say, I'm not going to litigate this in the media. And I say, great if the other side agrees. And even if both sides comment, depending on the allegations against your client in the court papers and in the lawsuit, it requires a response. Someone says your client used the N-word. Someone says your client said, look, I don't think women are qualified to do this job, or something to that effect. They accuse him or her of misappropriating corporate assets, and you say no comment. The media's going to write about it. They're going to write about it, and they're going to say, when asked, Jane Smith refused comment. Jane Smith's lawyer refused comment. The media and much of the public views that as guilty as charged. While you can take the fifth in a court of law, you can't take the fifth in the court of public opinion, because the public opinion views that as guilty. So you have liability, and there are ways. Again, I recognize you may be restricted in what you can say, but even if you say, we're not going to go point by point, but the allegations are false. This lawsuit is replete with inaccuracies. We're not going to go one by one. At least you're on record saying what's said about your client is inaccurate. Now, it isn't saying, you're not saying this lawsuit allegation. If you said all the allegations of the lawsuit are inaccurate, that probably gives you some exposure, because there may be one or two that are true, right? So that's why I say you can say it's replete with allegations, and as long as there are a substantial number, you can get away with it. And it's these kind of nuances that make the difference, and it makes a difference with the way the media looks at it too.
What are some of the changes? How have you seen social media change the world of reputation management?
Well, a number of ways. One is it really doesn't matter so much today. Let me rephrase that. One is that it really doesn't matter as much today as it did years ago where the allegation is published. Meaning, you can publish it in the Des Moines Register, and it's all over the internet. And you can read about it in New York. Whereas before, if there was a story in the Des Moines Register, unless the New York Times wrote about it, you wouldn't know about it unless you had a clipping service. The other thing is that no matter where the allegation is published, it stands a chance of taking a life of its own. And I remember a client some years ago, an industry publication, a Hollywood industry publication, wrote something, and he said, it's only such and such a publication. I'm not really worried about it. And I said, you don't understand. The major media covers all of the Hollywood trades. No. And the next thing I know, Vanity Fair was calling because they read about it and they actually cited the media organization. So, and then it became Vanity Fair and it blew up. So, you have to recognize that. And there's also the aspect that, unlike the New York Times, LA Times, Wall Street Journal, and the like, and the industry trades, much of social media is unedited, meaning nobody checks for accuracy. There's no editor, there's no checks and balance. And so I remember one time a client was upset because there was a blog that published something. Now, this is some years ago. And they said, can you contact them? And the lawyer, first he had his lawyer contact them. And the lawyer said, I'm going to sue you. He said, look, you don't have to sue me. You can take all my assets. You can come get the couch in my living room. That's the only asset I own. And they said, "Oh my God, what do we do?" You know, and so we were able to work with the blogger, and we got the result. But the problem is there's no editing, and so there's a chance that it's going to be mischaracterized, and then how you deal with it, is a whole other story, and that requires a whole different approach.
And how do you think some things have stayed the same, even in this world of social media? Sometimes you can say things that was true 100 years ago, it's true today. What would you say those constants are?
Well, I think when you look at, what's the same, news is news, right? And what, people are looking for things. Before they would look for items that would impress their readers. Now they're looking for clickbait, right? And so they're saying what's going to cause clicks. And so the New York Times has one standard, and the various social media has other standards. A sexy photo is going to create clicks. A sexy photo is going to attract reader attention. Now, for the New York Times doesn't take that approach, but there are a number of newspapers that do. So I think the constant is that you have to make sure that what's printed is accurate. We go back to social media, and if there's an inaccuracy, we will contact them, request, and then demand a retraction or a correction. And it's easier if you say, one of the other things that's interesting is you wouldn't think a correction or a retraction would make a difference. So sometimes we'll say, we'd like an amplification, because reporters don't want to acknowledge that they have to, they don't want to do a retraction or a correction, because that's kind of a black mark against them. But if you get an amplification, that isn't a black mark against them. So it's the way you approach the reporters, and if they say someone someone pled guilty and they pled not guilty, that's a correction. That's easy, right? But on the other hand, if they say, well, there were nuances in the way that they discussed it, or you want to get a correction in the way they described something, you can say, look, you didn't quite characterize that right. Can we get sort of an amplification on that, or can we get can we change that? You get less resistance.
And as to what you're saying, I don't know, Mike, if you've seen there's a National Geographic and a history biography about Bonnie and Clyde. And I remember reading the media stories about them, and they had photos of everybody who flocked to see the car after the shootout. And I always think about that when I think of the public media, about how hungry the public is. They just wanted to see it. They were so fascinated by this story of these celebrities. So imagine, maybe not in that context, if you deal with that often, but I was very struck by how these people just didn't even know these people, but wanted to see and be a part of it.
Well, that's one thing that is very much the same. The public is fascinated with celebrities, and is fascinated with Hollywood celebrities, sports celebrities, and what they do. What they do will be reported. Where if I did it or you did it, well, you're a celebrity. But if I did it, you wouldn't. It wouldn't be reported. And you have to recognize that. On the other hand, there's certain things, if anybody does make news, right? And so you have to understand, and you also have to be careful today, because as I mentioned before, you can take a blog that you haven't heard of that can write something, but someone who's covering, let's say they wrote something about you, and someone who's covering the legal industry might be following that blog. And so the next thing you know, the LA Times is calling you and say, I saw something in this blog and they said such and such. And you say, well, that's not quite right. And all of a sudden they're writing about you because they saw something in this blog. And there's the real difference today is the sources of news are not, they used to have to be direct, right? Or somebody told a friend of yours or a competitor of yours went to an LA Times reporter and told them about you. Now it's not a direct communication. Now it can appear somewhere in some obscure blog where, the assets of the blogger are his couch or her couch, as I said. And that all of a sudden finds its way into other media. In my last book, I wrote about the fact that I think the media, the social media today, as powerful as it is, and it's enormously powerful, but it's still a means to an end. And because, let's use President Trump as an example. If all of the traditional old line media had not reported on his tweets, I'm talking the LA Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, ABC, if they never reported, his tweets would have landed with a thud. There would have been the followers, but how many followers would he have really had if the only news organization or the only source would be to follow him on Twitter? It would probably be his supporters, right? And so that's what I mean about a means to an end, right? He publishes something, he tweets something. The Washington Post finds it to be so outrageous, they write about it, or they find, geez, this is so newsworthy, we're going to write about it. And then everybody writes about it. Now it's a big deal. You go back, he tweets, nobody else picks it up. And so, the media kind of blames, Trump for this, but the media created Trump. And the media, the very media that criticized Trump, is responsible for having his messages disseminated as broadly as they are. And so there's a great irony there, I think. And these, a lot of these editors are old friends of mine, and I've told them the same thing. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Mike, are there other forms of communication and public relations that you think going forward are going to be important other than social media?
Well, I still think it's important to have face-to-face communications. We're doing this on Zoom as we all have to because of the pandemic. I don't think you can substitute personal meetings for Zoom. I think you still lose something. Certainly better than just telephone communications, but I think that you'll see more personal meetings when the pandemic. I think we'll go backwards and some degree. You will see a lot of people working at home because they realize, oh my God, I can do this. And I have a friend who's a senior partner at a law firm, and he said, I save 2 hours a day. I'd rather just work at home and save those 2 hours and work on my clients or do some things on my own. So I think that the way we work will change. But I think you're still going to see personal meetings, and I think you'll still see more personal interactions.
Mike, I think we can all agree that there are a few people, if anybody, I don't know if anybody reads a room or a situation better than you do. And I know that you can't give away all your secrets, but could you tell us how you read a room or a situation when you walk in?
You have to listen, right? It's important to listen, and it's important to observe and to pick up body language and to pick up tone of voice. And I tell people that when you're going to try to persuade someone, in addition to listening, it's very important on your tone of voice. And when you write something, it's tone of voice. And the nuance is very, very important. So, I listen, I observe the way people interact. I'm kind of when I'm giving a speech, I'm sort of reading the audience. I've learned over the years. I told a joke I remember I was very young and I was speaking before a large group, and the joke landed with a thud. It was horrible, and I thought to myself, I'm not going to lead with jokes anymore. And I don't think I have. I'll say something a little sarcastic or turn of a word, but you sort of learn from it over the years. And, when you're 27 and heading PR for a Fortune 500 company, you think you're a big deal, but you don't realize how young that is, right? And how little you know. So that's how I read a room. I just sort of watch, look, and listen.
Mike, Fortune has compared you to Winston the Wolf, the character in Pulp Fiction, which I'm sure you read and heard. When you hear a reference to Pulp Fiction now or see a scene from that movie, how do you feel?
Well, I chuckle at that, right? And the reporter, he's a great writer. He's now with ProPublica, and what he said was, like Winston Wolfe from Pulp Fiction, who cleaned up the blood of assassins. He said Sitrick cleans up the messes from corporate and personal messes, and I thought that was I kind of got a kick out of it, but I don't really think that way, and so I just as I say, I mean, somebody called me the Baron of Bad Tidings once, and the flat for when you're under attack, and these people are having kind of fun at my with what I do, but it looks very serious. And it's a difference between a recession and a depression. A recession is when the other guy's out of work, and a depression is when you're out of work. And these are very serious situations for people, and you can't lose sight of it. I had a client one time, very, very famous, well-known businesswoman, who almost lost her business. I mean, you know her; she's very, very famous. And I hadn't met her the first year I worked for her. It was kind of like Charlie's Angels, right? I'm talking on the phone. I never saw her. And when I met her, she said, I can't tell you how much I appreciated day or night, Saturday, Sunday, or, Monday, you were always available. And I said, even in Hawaii, you were available when you were vacationing there. It's a long time ago. And I said, well, my wife didn't appreciate it. She said, Mike, when you see your whole world breaking up in front of you, imploding in front of you, you're terrified, and you don't know if your whole life is going to be destroyed. You don't know how meaningful it is and how helpful it is that someone takes the time and can walk you through it and calm you down. It was kind of an epiphany for me. I never really thought of it because it's what I do, and it changed my life, and it changed the outlook on it. This is very serious stuff for people, and you have to take it as such. So, that's the way that's what I do, and so they can have fun with the names, and that's fine. I'm flattered, but at the end of the day, my job is find out the facts and to as best as possible protect my client and my client's reputation, and in most instances, in fact, in all instances, to make sure the truth comes out. Now, if the truth isn't good, then the question is, what do you do about it, right? And if I was asked not too long ago about a celebrity, and I said, look, they have to want help. And, this is somebody who really needed help. And if I were asked to represent this person, if they said they don't want help, I wouldn't represent them, because I think the best help you can do is to help them help themselves. So, now maybe they aren't guilty of that which they've been accused, and then that's a different story. And even then, I've had a client say, "Oh, I didn't do that," and I say, "Well, do you have any proof?" And he said, "Well, you don't believe me?" And I said, "It's not a matter of my believing you. First of all, if I don't believe you, I won't say you didn't do it. But I've got to convince other people you didn't do it. So what proof do you have? Or what can you help me with to get there?" And it's the same, it's a different venue, but we approach what we do the way a litigator approaches a court case. We first find out the facts, and then once we get the facts, we put together the best case we can and the best defense we can for our client. And then we take that defense to our judge, which is the media, who will then communicate it to the public. And it's the same sort of thing.
Of the cases you've worked on that you can discuss, what are some of the most memorable for you?
Well, we represented Patty Dunn, the chair of HP, who was accused of spying on our board. And Patty was wrongly accused. She called me on a Sunday. I was in my house in Malibu, and the phone rings and says, "Hi, this is Patricia Dunn. I don't know if you know who I am." And I said, "Patty, I'd have to be on Mars not to know who you are." And we talked for a bit, and I said, "Well, who's your lawyer?" She said, "Well, I don't need a lawyer." "Yeah, you need a lawyer." I said, "Look, my concern is HP is kind of throwing you under the bus." "No, they wouldn't do that." They did, by the way. And so I said, "Humor me. You need a lawyer." So we talked about who it would be, and I knew the person, and I got him on the phone on a Sunday, and I was right. And we not only restored her reputation. I put her on 60 Minutes. I'm on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. When I had her on 60 Minutes, her lawyer was Jim Brosnahan of Morrison & Forrester in San Francisco. And I remember we're doing the 60 Minutes interview, and he had agreed to it. I wouldn't have done it without him. We were sitting in the ante room watching on the monitor, and he said, "How do I let you talk me into these things?" And all charges were dropped, right? And I love that vindication. She had stage 4 ovarian cancer. She passed away less than a year afterwards. That was memorable. We ran the matter for Stanley Gold and Roy Disney when Roy ran a withhold vote for Michael Eisner. We were involved in the film Icarus, and Icarus, if you've seen it on Netflix, great film. The lawyer for the production company, who was a former federal prosecutor and a lawyer for a client of mine, calls me up and he says, "I want to talk to you about this movie I'm working on." I said, "Ed, I don't promote movies." He said, "Mike, I wouldn't call you to promote movies." And he said, "We're concerned that the whistleblower, Gregory Rodchenkov, could be assassinated by the Russians, because there were 3 people who knew about how the Russians got away with doping, and 2 of them mysteriously had heart attacks." And he said, "We don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, the best way to do it is let's get the story out before the movie comes out." Because he said the film producers were also concerned that they would discredit the film. So not only would they kill him, but then they could discredit the film because there was nobody to refute it. And I said, "So we should get it out." And so he said, "Okay, and I explained it to him. Then he got the producers on the phone and the backers. And they said, "Well, what about CNN?" And I said, "Look, CNN's great, but it doesn't have the gravitas that you need. You need the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal." And I said, "I think in this case, the New York Times, because of its international reach and prestige." So one of my partners, Sally Hoffmeister, and I called the editor-chief of the New York Times, who we both know, and told him about the story. And he did the story, 2 front-page stories. And he sent reporters out, they reported it. And we said to him, "Look, one of the reporters should be a Russian-speaking reporter, because while Dr. Rodchenkov speaks English, he doesn't understand the nuances." And the reason I said that was there was an allegation by a German filmmaker, in a documentary by a German filmmaker, that Rodchenkov was taking bribes. And what happened in the Russian doping, if you were a star, the Russian government would make sure you could dope and not get caught. That's the allegation that Rodchenkov was making. I don't have facts. I can just report what he said. But if you weren't, you were on your own. And there were two or three women who got, caught doping. And so they went to a German filmmaker. And so I said, Dr. Rodchenkov, did you take bribes for anti-doping from the coaches? And he says, what do you mean? He says, yeah, I got extra money beyond my salary. I said, well, from the coaches? He said, no. Everybody who did a good job got extra money after their salary, beyond their salary. So I thought, oh my God, So when the New York Times was there and he started to ask that question, I interrupted him. I said, I don't speak a word of Russian, but he has an issue with English. So please ask him in Russian. And of course, in Russian, they were able to communicate. I didn't know what they said, but I was sure that he explained it. And the story broke. World Anti-Doping Association, if you've seen the film, they met in my office in Brentwood. That was my conference room they met in. And they banned the Russians from the Olympics. And my client, I was told by somebody at Netflix that my client tried to sell Netflix the film, but Netflix was concerned that there was no corroboration of what was said. And so that that there was some liability for them in using the film. But when the New York Times did two stories, and literally, I think there were over 1,000 media all over the world that picked it up. Now all of a sudden, right? And what banned them for this, that gave them cover. The film won an Academy Award. It was really well done film. And they sold it for what was reported to be the highest price ever. So, that was a gratifying situation and kind of great fun. So we've had so many cases that are, we've turned around short sellers, saved businesses doing so. I had a client huge company in Canada, one of Canada's biggest companies, and on their 25th anniversary, the law firm was Kasowitz in New York, Kasowitz Benson et al. In New York, and he got up and he said, "We wouldn't be here today without Mark Kasowitz and Mike Sitrick." He actually said Mike Sitrick and Mark Kasowitz, which Mark will be up. Mark's a close friend. So I was going to say something to Mark about that, but I didn't. So it's gratifying. It doesn't always work out that way, but enough times that it's still fun.
What would you want us to know as lawyers if we're going to work with the public?
Well, look, it's an estate lawyer wouldn't do, unless she or he is qualified, wouldn't do complex patent litigation, right? Or wouldn't do, bankruptcy cases. Unfortunately, in our business, people profess to be jacks of all trades, right? Oh yeah, I can do crisis. Oh yeah, what kind of crisis have you done? Well, yeah, or oh yeah, I can do, patent litigation or, and the like. So, people will come to me and say, "We'd like you to promote our film." I said, "We don't do that. First of all, it would be way too expensive. Second of all, that isn't what we do. We don't have the expertise. We shouldn't be learning on your dime. Have we done Emmy campaigns? Yes, or Oscar campaigns? Yes, but the day-to-day stuff, that isn't what we do. That's not what we're known for. We've launched companies that we can do. But I think you need to see what experience the people have for what you need. And also, when you're dealing with a very sensitive situation, it's important to be able to get a correction at virtually any time of the day or night, because if something runs at 11 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night on CNN and you miss it, by the next morning, it can be all over the world, right? It can be picked up all over the world or on Reuters or wherever it runs. And so we've had situations where I remember on a Saturday, I saw an article about another very high profile client of mine. And I called my partner who was handling it day to day, and I said, it was on Bloomberg. And I said, did they call you on this? And he said, no. And I said, well, this is wrong, isn't it? He said, it's absolutely wrong. So I knew the reporter and I knew the line editor because Bloomberg says who the editor is. But it was so outrageous, we didn't get a call, and the client didn't get a call. So I called one of the senior executive editors who I've known for many years, and I said, John, when he saw it was me on a Saturday, it was like 1 in the afternoon in LA, so it was 4 in the afternoon in New York. He said, I'm assuming you're not in Princeton saying you want to get a drink tonight. And I said, you're right, John. And he said, what's up, Mike? And I told him, and he said, how did that happen? I said, you're the senior executive editor of Bloomberg, not me. He said, very funny. And he said, are you sure? And I said, John, how long have we known each other? You know I wouldn't call if I wasn't sure. So he said, I'll take care of this. He calls the line editor, and the line editor says to me, well, why didn't you call me? I said, no. Why didn't you or your reporters call us? He said, McCory has already taken my head off. And he said, we will get this fixed. Now, we got it fixed right away because I had a Google alert and it came up. I also had a different alert item, which when it came on, and it came up right away. And so it got fixed. Had it waited until Monday, the story would have been picked up all over the world. So being able to get to a top editor and have the credibility to get that changed, made the difference between the client being eviscerated wrongly with wrong facts and getting it corrected and not having the right story. And I'll tell you, the other thing I think that's critical is, remember we talked about no comment. And I recall that we had a client where the head of a publicly traded hotel chain was, so he was flying to New York in the corporate jet with his much younger girlfriend, and he was married, of course, and he that was just an aside, I shouldn't have said that, and so he took the girlfriend to the corporate hotel in Vegas, went to a meeting. She was found laying stark naked on the floor, dead of an overdose. So the client calls me, and the audit chair of the audit committee called me and said, look, we need you to help us. And so I get a call on a Saturday afternoon. I'm at the wedding of the son of my first cousin. And the chair of the audit committee said, look, Forbes is doing something. The day-to-day agency says, we shouldn't respond to the reporter because they know her and she'll only write bad stories. What do you think? He said, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He said, no, tell me what you really think. And he said, well, okay, let me get her on the phone. So we get on the phone. She's got a whole minion of people there. And some of them sounded 12 years old. And so she tells me the story, and it's a very prominent firm in New York. And I said, well, what did she want? We didn't even respond because, she's only does negative stories. I said, so you don't know what she wants? No. I said, well, I don't, look, I really disagree. I don't think it's very smart. And you could hear the young people in the background go, ooh, and I said, look, you can do what you want to the chairman of the audit committee. I don't think it's very smart. In fact, I think I probably said, I think it's stupid. I'd call, well, I think you're wrong. I said, look, it's not your call. It's not my call. It's the client's call. And he said, well, let me think about it. He called me right back. He said, call her up. I knew her too. And she had the facts wrong, right? So I said, what do you have? She told me. I said, let me get back to you. I got the facts, called her back, said this wrong, this is what happened, this, And so story published, and again, landed with a thud. Had they not called, that story would have been published with those very, very inflammatory facts. Remember, you have a dead woman here, right? You have potential criminal liability. You have a publicly traded company. And there's a perfect example of not engaging, not finding out, at least, and when I say to people, at least find out what you're not commenting on, you know, and they said, well, the reporter might get mad at me. I said, it's not a popularity contest, you know, and the other thing that you'll see is you'll see people in the PR industry saying, well, I don't want to confront that reporter. I have to deal with them on other things. And I say, you know, if you're more worried about your firm's reputation, more worried about your firm's interaction with the media because of other clients, you're in the wrong business. You've got to represent this client. Don't make it personal. You know, don't accuse a reporter of not being fair or not being honest, or just, you know, it's business. And if you have to go over their head to the editor, but tell them, you know, and I've done this, and a couple of times I'll have reporters say, are you threatening me? You're going to go over my head? And I said, would you rather than I do it behind your back? I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you, you know, and, you know, I'm going to do it whether, you know, I would think you'd want to know. And they said, yeah, you're right. You know? And so it's a matter of representing your client. And, you know, like if a judge issues a ruling that you think is wrong, you're going to challenge the ruling and you're going to speak up for your client. You can't worry that, gee, the judge may take offense and next time you go before her that she's going to be mad at you. Then you're not representing your client, right? You're representing yourself. So it's the same thesis.
Mike, thank you so much for your valuable time and for being here today. I find you and your stories and what you do just so fascinating, and I know that a lot of our viewers are going to. So this was just, again, such a privilege and a treat to have you.
Well, I'm very flattered you asked me. Hopefully the next time we see each other, it'll be in person and not via Zoom. Not that I mind being in Hawaii, but, you know, LA is my home, as my tax returns indicate, and unfortunately. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mike.